Hey, welcome everybody to our live program here on the app. We have an exciting program for you today. Britt Gillette was going to be my guest today. He ended up at the doctor's office, so he cannot. So you're stuck with me all by myself. Not true. I have a wonderful guest, jumped in at the last minute. He said he was available. I said, it must be the Lord. So he's been on here before. You're going to be super blessed. He's super smart, even though he says he's not, but he is. Please welcome Joe Kerr. Joe, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time out. I know it's dinner time there, back where you live, but thank you so much. And thank your family.
Happy to do it. Always happy to do it. Glad to do it. And we don't have dinner until 7 anyway, so not a problem.
Oh, well, that's great. We'll just go hours and hours on the program then. How's that?
However long you need.
We won't go that long. I'll start, you know me, I'll start rambling, and who knows what kind of questions will come out that won't make any sense.
The good news for you is if you ask a stupid question, I can guarantee a stupid answer.
Oh, that's I'm going to try not to ask any stupid questions then. Hey, Joe, real quick, give everybody a little bit of a background of you, some of the things you've been involved in. Your friend Scott Townsend was on here last week. He talked a little bit about his engineering and coding, a little bit of that, so people got to know a little bit more about him. You have quite a background too, and I think it will help people to understand where things are going a little bit better once they hear from someone like you. And so take it away real briefly. Well, as brief as you want to be.
Okay. Scott is a good friend. I talked to Scott today, as a matter of fact. I was managing editor at I Am a Watchman Ministries when he first launched that. And I have been a ghostwriter for many years. So that grew out of ministry background. My parents and my family have started churches and Christian schools all across the country and several other countries. And because those were largely ministry-oriented church plantings and things, there was no salary behind those. So I always had a job to support my ministry habit. And that allowed me to do a lot of different things. I was in the jewelry industry for a number of years, worked for Zale Corporation, was a buyer for them, was involved in the insurance industry, and I was involved in Wall Street. And each of those were just, like I said, things that paid the bills in between. I'm now an elder at our church and planted in South Central Georgia and a little more established here. And so I don't travel and do those things anymore, but had a lot of really unique experiences. Nobody knows who I am, and I like it that way. As a ghostwriter, that's the best way to be. But I've had an opportunity to work with some celebrities and some big name people that folks would recognize on Wall Street and other places. But being, like I said, a ghostwriter, I'm kind of behind the scenes, and that's the way it's supposed to be for a ghostwriter. So I get to brush shoulders with people who know a lot, and I just regurgitate what they say.
Yeah, you're pretty smart. I know you keep telling me you're not, but you are. With your involvement on Wall Street, this is going to help people to understand you know what you're talking about too when it comes to money. You have some legitimacy there that the rest of us don't have. We pick up the news, we read it. Some other media writer has written it. Some things come across that might be written by you. I know you contribute to Harbinger's Daily, I think also.
Yes.
And so with your Wall Street involvement, and then we're going to get going with a lot of questions, because I have questions, as everybody does this week, as we're hearing what's going on with China, petrodollars, CBDC, the collapse of the banking system. How much longer? Are we going to be marked? What's going on? So a little bit of your Wall Street knowledge.
Okay. I was a technical analyst. There are two kinds of analysis of Wall Street. There's fundamental analysis, which is all of the documents and things that companies put out. Here's how much money we made. We sold this many projects. These people work for us. Our business is good. That's fundamental analysis. Technical analysis is looking at charts and graphs and things like that and determining here's what happened in the past. And that's why we use those wonderful phrases that past, performance is no guarantee you future results. That's technical analysis. We're looking at what's happened before in certain situations and saying, if that same situation arises, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get the same result. That happens with the Fed. When they raise interest rates, certain things happen. That's why they use that tool. And so I wrote technical analysis and wrote a Wall Street newsletter called Stop Watch, and was involved in working with a technical analysis firm that basically sold that information to traders and hedge fund managers, people like that in Wall Street.
And you are definitely,
so that's a little background.
Yeah, we've talked further too. We won't go too much further into that right now, but it's really fascinating, your background is. And I have a theory, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, especially with what you did for Wall Street and with technical information and analysis. The people that, when you print up trillions of dollars, there's some pretty smart people that are involved in these decisions. They must know what the end result is going to be. You know, we have history. We're going to have inflation. We're going to have higher interest rates because of things are going to change. But the printing up of trillions of dollars, things are going to start collapsing. QE1 came around, what, 2008 was it? So, I mean, to me, it seems like things that are being done in the financial world are intentional. And I'm sure there's some people that actually thought they were doing something good, tried to save some things. But overall, there's some smart people at the top. And they must be able to project by looking at technical analysis what's happened before is going to happen again. Am I right in my thinking, or do you think I'm a little bit too simple in that?
No, money works on very simple principles. The more money you have, the less each of those pieces of money is worth. It's like cutting a pizza into big slices or small slices. If you take a 14-inch pizza and cut it in 2 pieces, it's still the same amount of pizza. If you cut it into 12 pieces, you got more pieces, but it's still the same amount of pizza. And the same thing happens when you print more money. The more money you print, the less each one of those dollars is worth. And yes, they are very smart people, but yeah, the most feared phrase on Wall Street is one that you will hear in the news a lot right now because they want people to believe it. And it goes like it's the biggest lie in the world. Do not walk, run when you hear it. It goes like this. This time it's different.
This time I should have called our live stream today. I should have called it "This Time It's Different."
This time it's different. Yeah.
And man, yeah, right. Sure. This time it's going to be different. So as I see what's coming, I want to start with the banking crises. Banks have had a problem for a long time, from what I understand. We see things collapsing. And then I want to work this out to what's going on with China, the direction we see things going there with BRICS. It's like every day there's more nations that are saying, hey, we're going to ditch the dollar. I think they're talking about it now. It hasn't happened yet, but the talk is out there. Biblically, I believe it's going to have to go that way anyways. But let's start with the banking crises. And where do you see this is going? And then central bank digital currencies. What do you see as the problem that we are looking at with CBDCs as a people group? What can they do to us, and what will they do to us?
Last time you and I talked, I think we talked about the 3 C's of a financial takeover, and that's what's happening. And we talked about it then. That was before the bank collapse, famously in SVB Bank in California, and then Signature Bank and several others, Republic. And then of course Credit Suisse overseas. Those were all hanging right on the precipice anyway. But the 3 C's of taking over financially a country are all based on the currency. First, you cripple it, then you confiscate it, then you crash it. And in order to take over, you have to do those three things. What happened that is being billed as a non-bailout? In other words, when they came in and said, don't worry, we'll cover all of the assets of all of the depositors, they had to, because all of those depositors in Silicon Valley Bank specifically, but also in Signature Bank, many of those accounts were owned by people who are very large contributors to the Democratic Party because they are Silicon Valley businesses. And it was also the money of many of those Silicon Valley business owners, meaning the billionaires themselves had their accounts there as well. So they had to backstop that bank and rescue all of their buddies, which they did. But when they did that, people have to understand that the government's money doesn't come for free. It's a borrowing source. So what effectively happened with the banks was the government took over those banks. Now, they didn't come out and announce it that way, but they nationalized those banks. If the government holds all of the assets, whose bank is it? It's theirs. And that's what happened. Every bank that they, quote, rescue, they have to either put it out of business then, shoot the horse and put it out of its misery, or they take it over, reimburse and cover all of the loans, but then they own all of the money and all of the depositors' accounts. And that is a natural step to confiscating the money. They now control all of the money of all of those businesses in Silicon Valley Bank and have all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. It's all in their hands. Think how much of the country you can control if you just control the purse strings of Silicon Valley. How much leverage do you have with what's being put out in the world? Well, who owns the information systems? Who owns the social media systems? Who runs Google? Where are they located? Who runs Facebook? And all of those things, and DeFi currencies, many of the DeFi currency systems are based in some of those companies as well. Famously, who was it? Apple wanted to do their own cryptocurrency at one point. Facebook has talked about the same thing. So there's a lot of money there. We're talking about trillions of dollars, and they now control that. So when the government came in and backstopped those banks, they said, we're in charge.
Wow. That was very insightful. Just the way you broke that up was cripple, crash, confiscate. Were those the three C's?
Cripple, confiscate, and crash. Crash the stock market, confiscate all the assets, and cripple the economy.
Okay. So with that, so you nationalize, totally get that, what's happened. And the way you put it, though, that is Silicon Valley. So as you said it, look at the control that the government got just like that. Just like that.
Yep. Now, you wait a minute. You can't put conservative stuff out because, well, you owe us all this money over here. So we need you to not do that. Yeah. So that's the kind of subtle leverage that they have over the few companies that they've needed it. But there were some who, because of their business model, had to pacify the conservatives once in a while. Now they don't have to.
Wow. That is very insightful. Thank you. Okay, last time we were together, we started out with 7 items that we started working through. What did we get through? 3 of them?
I don't remember how many. They were based on those 3 C's. In other words, if you know that the government is going to take all your money and crash the stock market and cripple the economy, who would fall for that?
Yeah.
And the reason why people fall for it is the same reason why people fall for Ponzi schemes. They've been around for years, but people still fall for it. And there are 7 reasons why. There are reasons why, the same kind of reasons why people will blindly follow the Antichrist financially, end up with a mark of the beast in order to buy, sell, and trade, and why people will follow the government blindly if they say, here's what you need to do. I'll give them to you real quick, and then people can apply, or they can ask questions online and we can answer them. The first one is people want to believe in a success story, even a fake one. People are drawn to celebrities and personalities. Think how many celebrities 2 Super Bowls ago were advertising cryptocurrency, and now they're all suing that same company for all the millions of dollars they didn't get paid. So some people are drawn because of celebrities or big names. Some people act based out of fear. The acronym FOMO, fear of missing out, FOMO. Some people act because you say, oh, you didn't hear?
Yeah.
And you immediately got their full attention. And then you tell them you have to do this. That's how billions of dollars, $40 billion got pulled out of Silicon Valley Bank in 48 hours, because all of these people who know each other were text messaging, I'm taking all my money out, I'm moving it here. And they could literally move billions of dollars from their phone. So they did. And you can collapse a bank. A bank run used to mean, you know, you wanted to rob a bank, you had to show up. Now you can do it with your phone. So fear of missing out is one of them. The fourth one is people act based on fear or euphoria. They're either really afraid and they make a dumb decision, or they're really ecstatic. This time I'm going to win the lottery. And so they buy 100 tickets for a dollar instead of just one. Now they just lost $100 instead of the one. So they act out of fear or out of euphoria. The herd mentality is number 5. People follow the crowd. If everybody's doing it, it's worked ever since the devil said it the first time. You don't know, Eve, you don't know what you're missing out on. Everybody's going to, it's the biggest thing. You got to be part of it. Don't miss out. So that's part of it. The sixth one is the thing that we talked about a minute ago. The biggest lie on Wall Street. This time it's different. And then the bottom last one, number 7, people love to reject the oldest truism there is, which is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But people don't want to believe that. They want to believe that they're the one person who found the one secret that nobody else knows. You know, talk about clickbait, you know, 10 secrets you have to know to make $1 million next year, and you'll get thousands of clicks.
You know what? It's like an infomercial. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. But advertisers are incredibly good. That's what they do. It's to sell you a product. And I can't tell you how many times I've been tempted to buy that weight loss thing because, wow, this, whether it's like, this sounds too good to be true, but I'm going to do it. And it's just so enticing. Okay, you bring it into the money world, and you bring up the euphoria. You know, I have a real estate background. I was in title insurance for 10 years before I was a pastor, and I have pretty good working knowledge of real estate, whether it be commercial or residential, but I know how things roll. But the worst time to buy, I guess it's like the stock market too. There's this euphoric time when people are excited, and that seems to be when most people jump in. Whether it was your point number 3 with the fear, but the euphoria does it. People get all excited, and that's what works with multi-level marketing. It works that way. Or the Ponzi scheme. I remember, gosh, it was probably 40 years ago, there was some Ponzi scheme that I got caught up in for about a week because the guy at the top was making tons of money. It was called a pyramid scheme. I remember that's what it was. Oh, yeah. That's what we used to call them. And, but that's it. That's what the euphoria does. And it can drive entire generations of people too.
That's true. Oh, yeah. They're selling a dream. You know, think how many of those, if you've ever watched one of those infomercials, what do? They start out with the guy in the $300,000 exotic, car, and he's telling you how he made his fortune, and he only works 4 hours a day, and he only works 3 days a week, and he's making that. And who wouldn't want that? Whether you want to just spend more time with your kids or whether you want to just work at home, and they push all of those buttons, and they're selling you that dream. It sounds too good to be true. Well, it is, because the way that guy who's driving that McLaren makes all of his money is because of all the idiots who send him $39.99 a month. And so he's making a lot of money and doesn't have to do anything. Yeah, he's making money off of telling you that he's exactly. That's where he's making it. All right, as we look at CBDCs, and okay, so we have this whole system
that looks like it's crashing. You keep hearing, you know, I've been hearing for a long time the stock market's going to crash and this is going to have, the banking system is going to collapse and everything else. I know that there's a time coming when it will, because biblically I can project into the time of the tribulation period. So I know that's going to come. But there's still, it looks to me like we're in this slow motion, just collapse of everything, whether it be morality in America. There's a rot on the inside that's taking place, while at the same time you have some of the things that hold up the society when it comes to business, finance, and so forth. These things seem to be in this slow motion collapse. Give you one example is I watch a lot of real estate programs, and I watch people that are saying how awful the real estate is on the West Coast, and the East Coast is still holding up fairly well. Well, you get the impression from looking at that, Joe, that all of the West Coast is in this absolute collapse. It's all going to look like Tijuana pretty soon. But you know, I live on the West Coast, and where I live, the real estate hasn't crashed yet. You know, I don't live in a great paradise area, but there's parts of the West Coast that are going down. San Francisco, I don't live near San Francisco. You have the Silicon Valley issue. So we have that. Seattle, certain other areas. So yeah, we see it happening, but it's not happening in the way a lot of the talking heads are saying. Same thing with the stock market. I can probably find somebody every day that says, hey, the stock market's going to crash in the next, tomorrow you're going to wake up, the banking system. So it appears to me, yeah, things are going to go that way. Like you said, the technical analysis, I can comprehend and say, okay, it's definitely going to go that way. But when, is the bottom just going to fall out one day? I know in the tribulation period, it will be really bad, but it hasn't collapsed yet. Do you see this as just this slow motion thing that's going to keep going down, or do you see it going off the edge of a cliff, or what's your projection as a technical analysis expert?
There is typically some kind of catalyst. In other words, there's one major event that people react to. Now, Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse in Switzerland and several others that have had problems, and Signature that's being, held up, and Republic that are being backed up by other banks right now. Those banks were the ones that had a problem. But you can go back and look at the newsreels from a couple of weeks ago. There were people who were taking money out of their whatever other bank, name any other bank, Wells Fargo, Truist, any local or regional bank. There were news reports of people showing up at their banks, taking money out, even though their bank didn't have any particular problem. All you have to do to cause a major collapse is create chaos. There are a lot of different ways to create chaos. You can do that by, war, threats of war. China can make some threat. You can create chaos a lot of different ways. But what people don't realize is back 50 years ago, if you wanted money in the stock market, you had to put it there. Now you can trade, just like we were talking about the people taking money out of the bank on their phone. You can trade your retirement account money from your phone. So regular Bob, Sally, Bill, Susie all have access to that marketplace. So that you basically took out the middleman. Instead of making a phone call to invest in the stock market, now you can do it yourself. And because the transactions are instantaneous over the internet, it happens immediately. I've got a live feed satellite at my house that I trade with. I still day trade the market from time to time. And my trades happen within 1.3 seconds. So from the time I press my keyboard, the trade happens in Wall Street, and had to go through a satellite in outer space in the meantime to get there. But that happens that fast. So when all of the money in people's stock market accounts, people's IRAs, people's 401ks, when all of that money is controlled by a few people, you can crash the system, and everybody's money very simply with a few mouse clicks, because big companies that trade those accounts own this. Wow, it gets really technical. Let me see if I can make it simple. It used to be if you owned one share of AT&T stock, that gave you the right to vote. You were a shareholder. You could vote on something that AT&T said they were going to do. You had the same amount of votes as somebody owned 1 million shares. But when people put their money into mutual funds, or people put their money into their 401k funds, those are controlled by a larger corporation. Corporations like Vanguard, or some of the other big ones out there. And these are not evil people generally, but the rules changed a few years ago. So now, instead of you having voting rights because they own the fund and your money is just lots of money in the fund, they own all the voting rights. That's how woke corporations are able to leverage their power, because they can sell Apple or Google or whatever the entity is. We hold this many voting rights because we control all of these shares. So they can quickly transact and crash something that would have taken how long for 1 million people with one share each to get all the information, make a decision that they were going to do something, and then act on it. Even 10, 15 years ago, that would have taken quite a bit of work. You would have had to see it on, TV or hear it on the radio, figure out there was a problem, call your broker, panic. The broker would have to call somebody on Wall Street on the floor. That person would have to enact a trade physically there on the floor. Now all of that is digital. And there aren't people walking around on the trading floor. Back when I was Wall Street, there were actual traders there yelling and screaming, open outcry trading. That doesn't happen anymore. But because they hold so many votes, they can tell those companies, this is what you're going to do, or we're going to pull all of our votes, all of that money for all these people we represent, and we're going to put it over here. So you could put all of that power in the hands of a very few people. And that is how you leverage the system and crash it, because whatever woke ideology drives that particular CEO of that particular fund, then that's what drives their decisions. And right now, that's ESG. And ESG is making the decisions for them. If they're against oil companies, or they want climate change, or they want some radical agenda enacted, they pressure that company to do it because they hold that many votes.
Wow.
Did that make sense?
That is an excellent explanation. Best one I've heard. That really makes sense. So when you see something like this past week, Budweiser comes out with their new Budweiser Light Cans, a transgender person that says they identify as a teenage girl. And then there's another can that has all these different pronouns on it. And you can see when you have all this money involved, whether Budweiser does that intentionally, which my guess is they did, but there's pressure upon the corporations to go along with the ESGs. I'm not coming to defense of Budweiser. It's not what I'm saying, everybody. I'm just saying, trying to wrap my head around this. So BlackRock or Vanguard, you get people with nefarious, or just they have different ideology. They can force them all on you, whether it be, like you said, the climate laws, the E's, the S, the social, which would bring in the LGBTQ and everything else. And that makes them exceptionally powerful. Now, what I understand, you start looking at the large banks and these large corporations, they're pretty much all in with these ESGs too. And so when it comes to the little guys, how do you defend yourself against that? What do? You have, because it all, you're talking about just the ability to crash the whole system. So when we start looking at, there's so many questions that people have now. What do I do if the bank says, hey, everything got switched over to digital currency? Or, I mean, there's so many different ways that everything can crash, right? There's this article that you had sent me from Bob Prechter. I believe you said it was from 2010.
I think it was 2010. Yeah. And he's a technical analyst, wrote several books on the subject, and is very well known on Wall Street. Has been around for, since the 80s, actually. He is an expert in that particular field of Elliott wave theory. It's a mathematical analysis of the stock market and why trends go the way they do, based on human nature.
Let me ask you, on the Elliott wave theory, I believe that is what Larry Fink of BlackRock, I don't know if it was the Elliott wave theory or another one that he used to be able to create some of the technical analysis for some of the predictions that he had with BlackRock. But with the Elliott...
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it was very fascinating as I looked at some of the history. Aladdin from BlackRock and so forth, that was Larry Fink had taken and developed. I guess it was behind the scenes maybe. He may have not developed it himself, but it's all involved there. And so in this article by Bob Prechter, the title of it is Understanding the Fed, How to Protect Yourself from the Common Misleading Myths About the U.S. Federal Reserve. The experts taken from Conquer the Crash and the Elliott Wave theories, both by Bob Prechter. So how do you protect yourself? I mean, I think that is a question, the million-dollar question that pretty much everybody has. I can tell you, Joe, I would say at least once a day I'll get an email. We have various ways that people can email us. And it's, okay, what do I do? Do I buy gold? Do I buy silver? Do I stock up on bullets? What happens? You know, what do you do? I mean, is there protections? I know I'm not asking you as a financial analysis. I'm just saying.
No, that's okay. This is where I give the other disclaimer. I'm just an idiot with an opinion, like all the other idiots with opinions. Do not make any decisions based on this idiot or his opinions. There is a limited amount that you can do. I tell people to have enough assets on hand to be able to function for a certain period of time. Typically, you need to have enough physical cash on hand to last you for about a week. Whatever you would need to function for that period of time. If you plan on hunkering down to weather a storm, you need to have that. When we lived in Florida, it wasn't uncommon for the power to be out for several days at a time. Well, you can't walk into a grocery store and use your debit card when the power's down. The gas stations, same thing. So you should have some cash on hand anyway. You can get that from any of the financial gurus out there, whether it's Susie Orman or any of the others that say have a certain amount of your salary in savings. I say have a certain amount of that in cash at your house and be able to function, whether that's just to go to the grocery store, put gas in your car or whatever for a short period of time. That's just common sense. The other part is make sure you're investing in the things that are eternal. And we can't overstate that. I've seen people abuse that principle as well. And I'm sure you've been around ministry as long as I have. You've heard the people who scare people. Well, Jesus is coming back. So you need to give all your money to the church, cash in your 401k, sell your house and give all the money to the church. And then they have nothing to live off of next week. And they're the people that the church is supporting because they don't have a place to live. They don't have a car. They sold their car. They sold all their jewelry. They cashed in their life insurance. They did all those things, but we don't know when the Lord is coming back. It could be next week. I mean, I see all kinds of signs that indicate that bad things are happening in the financial markets, and I watch that closely. So that's where I'm looking. But I see the same thing socially. You mentioned the drag queen shows or some of the other strange things that are happening. And we can make a new list every week. We don't even know what's coming next week or what technology is going to be invented. I used ChatGPT to write a new bio for me, for an author bio. And I wish I could use it, but it flat out lied. It literally made up things about me. And as if it were true. And I was looking at that going, wow, that I wish I was a best-selling author 4 times, but I'm not. So yeah, but it literally just makes things up. And I think you talked to Scott about that as well. But people should play with it just so they understand how dangerous that is. But we see those things happening. Well, I remember when people were talking about the same thing with credit cards. Oh, credit cards are the mark of the beast. And, you know, there's something new every week. The bottom line is invest in the things that are eternal. What does that mean? That means you need to be telling your friends and your family about Christ if they don't know about Christ. That means when the church is doing things that are leading people to Christ, that is involved in the community, that's where you need to be spending your time and your money and investing your talents. Those are the ways that you invest in things that are eternal.
Amen.
You do that by raising up the next generation, by pouring into your kids and into other people's kids, and making sure that you are continuing that, because you don't know if Jesus is coming back in your lifetime. Billy Graham thought Jesus was coming back in his lifetime. I know that for a fact. I was in the room when he said it, but we don't know when Christ is coming back. There are good reasons why we believe he could come back next week, but it could be another 100 years. There are reasons, you know, well, there's Iraq and look where Russia is and all these things are, but all that would have to happen would be for them to take their tanks back and move back to Russia, and that would delay everything for another year. We don't have any way of knowing how fast those things are going to happen. We know they are going to happen because we read the last chapter of the book, but all of the how and why in between there, that is the part that you can get lost in the speculation.
Yeah.
Long answer to a short question. Sorry about that.
You know, actually, your answer was excellent, and I'm really thankful for it. Store your treasure in heaven. You know, and you bring up a point. There was this preacher several years ago who was preaching on end times. He since has passed away, but he was telling people to send him all their money because Jesus is coming back. Well, I'm thinking, well, if Jesus is coming back, you know, I mean, it was like he's gonna come. He actually set a date. Well, the gentleman had leased out more property that went way beyond that date. He needed more money to cover his lease. I'm going, you know, it's just a strange thing, you know. Store your treasure in heaven in so many different ways. Look, this ministry is funded by people who donate. We appreciate it because we can't keep going on without donations. And yeah, that's storing your treasure in heaven, no doubt about it. You know, you put your money in the right things. But you said, what about your neighbor? What about it's caring? It's the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ is sharing the hope that we have in heaven. You know, one of the things here, Joe, that I'm really excited about, we finally have our Mexico ministry starting through Hope for Our Times. There's 500 million people in the world that speak Spanish. And I'm thinking, that's a way of storing our treasure in heaven. You do whatever you can just to go out and reach the people in your community, your own family. What about the next generation? Joe, I still buy green bananas. You know, I hope Jesus comes tonight and we're called home, but at the same time, there's practical wisdom in planning. Well, what if I'm here in a year? What if I'm here in 5 years, 10 years? You said 100. You just scared a whole lot of people, but the reality of it is.
Yeah, I'm sure you got the chat
I'm
window
sure
lit up. Sorry
I haven't looked at it yet. I should look at it right now and say, oh no. No, hey, somebody said, stay wise and safe, Joe. That was Jill Newman who said that to somebody. This is great. Actually, people are.
Is that Hillel Newman's wife?
I don't know.
Okay. No. I know Hillel.
You do?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How do you know? Well, we can talk about that later.
Well,
he is such a
connections in the State Department is how we know
cool.
each other.
So we went to Shabbat dinner at his house just about a month ago. It was.
Tell him I said hello.
It was great. He's moving back to Jerusalem soon, but it was great. I ended up down in Hollywood. This is probably going to bore everybody, but I ended up down in Hollywood, sick, trying to do a video. So we're with Hillel and his family are wonderful there. And then I spoke down there. And then on Sunday, I tried to do a video on Hollywood Boulevard. Probably the most disastrous video I've ever done in my life.
Oh, my goodness.
But Hillel's just fantastic. Just so fantastic. So, okay, enough of my nonsense. All right. As we see things progress, storing your treasure in heaven is ministering primarily with the hope of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's the number one thing that we can do above all else. And Joe, when we talk about these events that are coming, they certainly look like all of this, whether it's CBDC, what we're watching going on with the petrodollar. I don't know if we'll have enough time to get into that. The collapse of America. We can see how all of this is going to have its fulfillment. That's why we talk about these things. But ultimately, it's about Jesus. He came the first time, and he's coming again. So that's why we do this, to show, hey, the Bible told us these things were going to happen. We shouldn't be surprised. We can look at the fast-paced things are going. We need to be ready, and most important, you need to be forgiven of your sins. And as Jesus himself said, there's no other, Jesus himself said, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except by me. In the book of Acts, there's no other name under heaven by which we can be saved. We have the answer. We have the hope of Jesus. So thank you so much for bringing in that hope and that reality. That's the most important treasure that we have, is storing up that treasure in heaven.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think I got to turn it over to questions. So I'm going to ask everybody to do this. Please put the word question in all caps and start sending in your questions, everybody. We'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. And then also with that, while you guys are getting ready with your questions, Joe, we're hearing every day there's another nation that is saying we're going to ditch the dollar. They're threatening to the whole petrodollar issue. We used to be on the gold standard. We're not anymore. Maybe you can give everybody just a little bit of an understanding about, going back to the time of Nixon. You can go back further than that if you want. Help us to understand a fiat currency. I know there's a lot here, but if you can unpack it in a simple way we can all get it, that would be great, so we can understand the problems that America is facing and really the world.
Sure. Give it a brief history. Back in 1933 and earlier, we were on the gold standard. The dollar bill was transactable. You can't carry that much gold in your pocket. So in order to pay your bills or conduct business, you didn't want to carry around a bag of gold coins. So we came up with the paper dollars. And a paper dollar is called fiat currency. It's from the Latin. It means a command. Basically, it was a piece of paper that you could present to the bank, and it was a command for the bank to give you that much real assets. In other words, gold. When we were on the gold standard, there was a time, and people can't imagine that now, but there was a time where you could actually walk into a bank and give them a $100 bill, and they would give you $100 worth of gold coins. The banks actually transacted in gold. So it was a surrender upon demand note up until the late 40s. The bank notes actually said surrender for this much gold was printed right on the bills. It's not anymore. And in 1933, it was changed. Basically, the president promised, Roosevelt. Interestingly, it was the first New Deal. Remember AOC and Biden came up with the second New Deal? The first New Deal was when they said, we're going to confiscate all the gold. And that was in 1933. And so they took all the gold. Oddly, President Roosevelt referred to it as surrendering your gold. And he said that, don't worry, the gold standard will still be intact. That was on March 8th, 1933. 3 days later, he signed an executive order confiscating all the gold and forbidding banks to make any more payments in gold after guaranteeing the public that he wasn't going to. 3 days. And then only a month later, in April, he signed another executive order, and he called the people who refused to turn in their gold hoarders. You hoarders, you're hoarding the gold, and actually used the phrase, he said that they need to return the gold as if it belonged to the government, not you. And we see, you could draw so many parallels with that what's going on right now and how much pressure, subtle pressure, is being put on people. Think how they tested that whole theory out back in 2020 and 2021. And if we put the right kind of subtle pressure and call people bad names and say it's, whatever of the whatevers, then we can pressure people just by calling them names. Well, it worked before. People turned in their gold and we went off the gold standard. And as with most executive orders, he also promised that that executive order was limited only to the time of the emergency. That was in 1933. Do you know when that executive order was rescinded? 1974. So 30 years after he died, it was still in power. So those things, as we know from executive orders, never go away. And that's true still today. But you can pressure people into doing a lot of things. Bottom line, when we were off the gold standard, in order for the dollar to still be the world transactable currency, we had to base it on something else. Well, what is it that every country needs if it's not gold? Every country needs energy. That's one of the two top things. They need money and they need energy. And so the U.S. currency became the backing for all energy transactions around the world. Every major oil producing country, every major oil consuming country transacted in dollars, in U.S. dollars. So the fiat, the backing for our currency, instead of being gold, transferred to oil. That's why the term petrodollar was created. The oil transactions were backed in U.S. dollars. Well, what happened 3 weeks ago? China negotiated with Saudi Arabia, and before that with Russia, and before that with Iran, to transact all of their energy trade in Chinese yuan. So what happens when you take away the only substantive basis for the dollar, the energy trade? What happens to your dollars? What are they worth? There's a delay. There's a boomerang effect. It takes a little time, but sooner or later, they will be worth nothing. Cripple, confiscate, crash.
Okay, so now with that, and there's many nations that are saying they're not going to trade in the dollar anymore. They're starting to talk about it. I believe they see a very, very, very weak administration. They see other things that are happening here in the United States. I believe most nations are even pushing back against the wokeness of America. Africa, not just Uganda anymore, now other African leaders are saying, wait a minute, we don't believe in your LGBTQ policies. This stuff is just wrong. And, so other nations are saying, it's like the whole world is looking at America and we're becoming a laughingstock to much of the world, but they don't see a leader here. And as such, I mean, this is why they're going, okay, well, we're going to go where the strength is. Countries might not like China, but you know what? They're going, America's got serious problems. So the doubts are there, but it will take time because the talk is out there now, but as far as real decisions moving forward, we'll see how that pans out, correct?
Yeah, that's an international move that has long-lasting consequences. You don't just change the trade structure of the world overnight. And there will be some of those countries that will push back. They'll negotiate with China. They'll say, well, we put that, this is a Middle Eastern tradition. Okay. So it's not any slight on that part of the world. I have Jewish roots. I can tell you we bargain for everything. That is true over there as well. So they'll get China on the hook and then they'll push back a little bit and say, oh yeah, well, you know what we really need is this. And then they'll bargain and China will come back with that and there'll be some give and take. So it will take some time, but sooner or later, somebody else is going to control those transactions and not the United States.
Yeah, it's going to happen, but also you throw into the mix, you're talking about earlier, CBDCs, what's it going to take to get there? You throw in a big crisis and all of a sudden, voila, everything has changed. And also with a collapse of the United States economy, it's like the only way to really salvage something is you switch over to this digital currency too, would be my thinking. You know, we have the whole issue with Russia and Ukraine, you know, to distract from problems at home. I mean, we're pouring so much money into that situation there. Doesn't look good. People are all over the map when it comes to their opinion on what should be done with that. But I mean, things just look rather rocky, to say the least. And we're in a very interesting time in the history of the world as we just look, we're just staring at the abyss, so to speak.
Now, before you can change the direction of a government, you have to, and this is right out of Rules for Radicals, those who have studied Saul Alinsky and know the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bidens and the people that are in power in many of those places understand that came right out of that book. If you want to bring about something new, you first have to cause chaos in what exists. And once you cause chaos and collapse, then you can bring in your idea. What they don't know is that what they're bringing in is not what they think it is. The devil is going to be behind it at some point. I don't know if it's this time or if it'll be the next time, you know, if it's the third New Deal that's coming in a few years or if it's this one. It doesn't matter. Our mission is the same. That's to preach the gospel. But the changes that they're playing with, they're playing with fire on a very, very large scale. And yes, I think the people that are in some of those offices know what they're doing. I think some of them are hopeful that they can do something nobody else has been able to do financially before. So they're working with the best intentions. I think there are some that are far more nefarious. They do know what's coming and they understand the spiritual ramifications of it. People have read my article that was in Jan's magazine about Yuval Noah Harari, who is kind of the spiritual advisor, to put it in simplest terms, to the World Economic Forum. He is kind of the, behind the scenes. Let's see. Well, how do I put it? He wouldn't make a very good Antichrist, but he'd make a really good false prophet. So he's that guy. So they have a spiritual input. They just don't realize the fire that they're playing with.
They don't. Speaking of some of the people behind the scenes that are planning with things, whether it be spiritual on the one side, which you explained so well there, you look at the other and a planned collapse by some of the people. You would probably remember who it is that said this. I don't know if it was a Rockefeller or Rothschild or who it was, but you buy when there's blood in the streets. And, you know, so you look at this, you hear that and go, okay, when everything gets really bad, you set it up and that's when you buy, when it's an absolute disaster. And so you create all of these things and it's in this chaos, it's in the crisis, in this absolute collapse that you have these global corporations that can take over everything too. You can foreclose on everybody so they can't own their home anymore. Well, the government can step in. Well, SVB, what you described, perfect illustration for an even greater takeover of pretty much everything there is. I think of the words of Klaus Schwab, who said not too long ago, by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, you keep collapsing everything, they'll get there. Okay, I have a couple of questions for you. First one, somebody asked, where can they get my book? If you go to the website or on the app, Hope for Our Times, you're on one of them right now if you're asking the question. So it's on there, just click and it takes you to that. The hard copy is not quite available yet. As soon as it is, those will be sent out, but you can do the pre-order now. Okay, Good Breakfast and Patrick Cox have a similar question. Who will get our 401k and investments when we are raptured? That's a loaded question. And Patrick Cox says something, it goes along the lines of the 401k pensions and so forth. A little bit more concerning, I think people have. How will Social Security and pensions be affected by CBDC? I mean, guess this is just speculation. I can guess, but what are your thoughts on that?
That's a tough one. Remember that the goal of those people, like you quoted Klaus Schwab, that the goal is to get people convinced that owning nothing is a good idea. You do that by telling them over and over again, the government will take care of you. The solution to every problem is more government, if you're from a certain perspective. And whether that is your health care, which is what they're controlling with those things. You control elderly people and people on low incomes with fear. You control people who are wealthy with the promise of even more wealth. So you're still, the goal is still the same, control. That's what it's about. There's certain people who have a lot of money. They don't want more money. They don't need more money. What they want is power. Klaus Schwab has all the money he could ever spend in a lifetime. He wants power. There's a whole different dynamic with people who want power, and that's another entire program, but it's all about control.
Yeah. Thank you. And the World Health Organization is meeting coming up in May, and that is about control and your health, and the United States being subject to that. So it's another subject too for another time. Andrea Fisher says, how great is our God that we all can connect over your app at the same time all over the world. I am so thankful. Amen, Andrea. Thank you so much, because we can. And we have, oh, by the way, you're in Georgia. So we checked out the top 20 cities in the world that watch Hope for Our Times. 3 of them were in Australia, by the way, which is pretty cool. But one of them was Atlanta. I think Atlanta came in at like number 5 in the whole world. So we're looking at heading to your area to do a conference sometime, because we have a lot of viewers in that area. So say, hey, let's go there. And I'll be inviting.
Absolutely.
I'll be inviting you to come and share some
I
things.
like it. I like it. We'll make it happen. I couldn't make it to the one in Orlando, but I will definitely drive up to Atlanta.
That'll be great. Joe, thanks for joining me. I kept you a little bit longer than I promised, as I do with all my guests. But thank you so much. It was great. And it was on such a short notice, too.
Always a pleasure.
And yeah, it was always great having you on. I know it's about 6 o'clock where you are, so go say hi to your wife and thank her for me yeah, maybe I'll meet her someday. Maybe I'll thank her in person. But thank you for doing this, Joe. Really appreciate you. And you're very encouraging. And I would read whatever you can that Joe writes, whatever you can find, the things that you know he's written. And you will be blessed. God bless you, everybody. And see you tomorrow. I'll be back here. I don't know if I'll be by myself tomorrow or not, but we'll find out. God bless y'all.